much talked about getting the tune-up, right? And that was pretty much our theme about getting the tune-up and getting something started. Otherwise, we know that in this time, a lot of black people, a lot of American people are angry, upset at something. And if they're angry and upset, that means they're going through some things. So with that, because we can have emotions, but when do we know that our emotions are getting out of hand?
So, again, one of the keys with any kind of emotional challenge is when it comes to there being an imbalance in how you're experiencing it. If you find that you're experiencing a negative or unwanted emotion most times than not, or if you find that you're experiencing a negative or unwanted emotion more than positive emotions, or even just a neutral emotion, when it's, again, the dominant experience, the dominant emotional experience, then that's when you want to check in, and that's when you have an indication that something's off. And a lot of times it can come out in small ways, like you're just irritable, way more irritable than you usually are. So it may not be that you're having anger outbursts all over the place, but again, it's an unwanted negative emotion that's not neutral and it's not positive. And when that's dominant, you want to try and start thinking about what you can do to shift that balance.
You know, when we talk about emotions and people don't really check in with themselves. Like, what is some of the ways that you could say, like, because they're not sure if it's negative, they're not sure if it's positive, they're not even sure if they're staying on one more than the other, this is just how they are. You know, they throw these words out there like, this is just what I am, and it's not a good what I am. What's one of those things they could do that, like, really self-check?
So there are a number of different practices, and everyone has to try different things to see what works for them. One of the practices that's really easy and straightforward is just journaling. And it doesn't have to be a physical journal. It can be just an app on your phone. It can be the Notes app on your phone.
Right.
I like paper and pen, so I do have a physical journal because I'm old school.
And you're not that old, but I get it.
I'm an old soul, I've been told. But if it's important for you to have something that you can physically see so you can start tracking your emotional experience. When we look back on our emotions, one thing about our mind is because we want to avoid negative emotions, we tend to remember negative emotions more than positive emotions because our brain is trying to figure out how can we not feel this again. And so our brain becomes occupied with that negative emotion or that negative experience. Once we start tracking our emotions, then we become more aware of, oh, this was a good day, or that was a good moment in the day. Yeah. Even though the day might have been trash, I did have a couple good moments, and so on and so forth. So journaling, try to do it at least once a day. But if you can, whenever you're eating, you eat 3 meals a day or 2 meals a day. Whenever you're eating, just pull out your app and just, hey, I'm feeling X, Y, and Z. Or I'm really angry, or this really good thing happened. But once you start tracking it, then you can have documentation, you can have evidence of your emotional experience, and it's not just all up in your head, and then you're recalling it from an emotional place, which is how all memory is recalled.
I was talking this morning, I did a little thing of a little conversation with the live media, and I said how really we're discovering our I. Like, who am I? What am I? Where do I go from here? And what do I do from this? And with all that, that means connecting to. You know, it doesn't mean separate from. And even if you learn how to connect to yourself or to your partner or to your pet or to your family members, sometimes we feel a little bit distant. And that's a trigger, isn't it?
Absolutely. Now, one of the wonderful things you said is that discovery of the I. And not to get too spiritual, but that I am is a very powerful statement. And so it's important for us to even be in check or in attunement with the language that we're speaking, because you are not your emotion. You experience emotions, but the I am is the individual or that thing that is experiencing the emotion. The I am, if I could use an analogy, the I am is the sky, and the emotion is the cloud. The cloud, it might be a huge thunderstorm that covers the whole cloud and you think the sun is never going to come out again. But at the end of the day, the cloud always passes, the sky remains. The I am remains, but the emotion passes. So even starting to use the language of, I am well, but I'm experiencing anger. Right, that can start separating that I am from that emotional experience. And then as you start becoming more aware of the I am and more aware of the emotions, you might feel disconnected or may feel a need to disconnect and distance from individuals around you, including friends, including family, because they are having an impact on that emotional experience.
Yeah.
But that awareness is how you start to set boundaries, and those boundaries is the first step to having a healthy emotional experience.
And that's the awareness we've talked about before, developing that awareness, because we need to, and that's a tough word, need. Should we keep that word? What do you think of that word, need? It's a tough one.
It's a tough one. It's a tough one. I'm not a fan.
I'm not a fan
of I need, and I'm not a fan of I should.
Right,
Those
should
two,
and
I
need
think should be taken out of our vocabulary personally.
Can'ts too. I'm a big non-can't. Just take out the can't. Can't, needs, and should.
Yes, that is a given. Because at the end of the day, all you need is within you. So you have all you need. Now you have desires and you have wants, and those are great and perfect and fine. But it's important to understand your wholeness and know that you have all you need within you.
Right. So now let's get into. We're going to go over some meat and stuff for people who heard us last week. They were like, okay, so now that I want to start a process, how do I? We got journaling. Let's start with journaling. So we have journaling. Do I go over the journaling? Do I analyze my journaling? Do I beat up the journal? Like how do I start this process? Like most people are thinking, how do I start this process?
Right. So one of the things that you that is special about a journal is you get to use it however you want. You get to use it as it works for you. One of the things I always tell my clients is to set an intention with your journal. What is it that you want to understand, or what is it that you want to get out of this journal experience? If it's that I want to better understand my emotional experience, then it may be beneficial to go back through and read what you've been experiencing. Maybe start categorizing, or just starting to be aware of what you're experiencing. If it's just to get it out of my head so I can clear some emotions, you may not ever need to go and revisit what you wrote. But the purpose of it was done when you got it out of your head and you wrote it down. So it really does start with setting an intention with what you want the purpose you want this journaling to serve, and then using it in that way. Another thing I'll say is any good thing, I always recommend that you make it a habit in some way. I'm a big fan of morning and evening practices where you have consistent things that you do. My mentor always talks about the 5-5-5 rule. 5 minutes of journaling, 5 minutes of affirmative reading, and 5 minutes of affirmative prayer or affirmative affirmations, or just something that's positive that you're saying to yourself to set your mind onto that positive wavelength. So it's 15 minutes in the morning. You can shorten that to 3-3-3 if that works better for you, but making it a habit and then setting an intention first is going to be really helpful in journaling.
You know what I like about the 5-5-5, and I liked it. And when you use the word that intentional practice, I just started smiling inside because I know exactly, if we don't develop a personal intentional practice, then how can we ever have a barometer of what we are and what we're able to be that day or that moment? Because if you run over that intentional practice of your time, that is a total indicator that you're misplacing yourself in that day. And I'm not going to say misusing, because if you misplace it, that means you're disconnected. And if you're disconnected, that means you're on a lower scale. And if you're on a lower scale, that means you kicked it off into a survival mode, and now we're in a whole different part of the brain.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when you tie in that part of the brain, again, the amygdala versus using your prefrontal cortex, which is the CEO of the brain, then we do see a lot of reacting to life versus responding to life. When you respond, you take the time to process what you're experiencing, and then make a choice in how you're going to manage or handle whatever is happening. When you react, it's literally an instinct of this is happening, this is what I'm feeling, now I'm going to do it, I'm going to think about it later, and we know that doesn't work out. And so, again, that intention, making sure that you show up for yourself in the day, and knowing that 15 minutes of you're worth that time. And it also goes into the do you value yourself question. Even when you're on a plane and they the whole face mask thing, put yours on first before you put your child's on. It's important because if you don't show up whole, you're doing them a disservice as well as yourself. So
if we go over the little things we just talked about today, one, we just talked about the intentional of journaling, right? And then set aside some time. And that's affirmation, journaling, and what's another one you said? Just if you get 3 of them instead of the 555, what's 3? Like, so you got intentional journaling, you have affirmation. What's another one? Or prayer, or
yes, prayer, meditation, silence. Take some deep breaths. Some people like breathing exercises. Yeah. You can do a quick 5-minute yoga practice where you're just doing some stretches in the morning and getting your body moving. But do try different things and figure out what works for you. This is your practice. You get to do with it what you want. But yeah, definitely the journaling, some type of affirmative prayer. And I also do some reading. That's another way of meditating. I read the Daily Word. There's a lot of different ones that individuals read, but some type of positive reading that gets you a positive message that you can carry on throughout your day.
Now, this is helpful, but it does not. And we stressed this last time with Kelsey, Dr. Kelsey, and you. You may need to see someone. And there's telehelp, there's conference calls. We're doing the Zoom thing now. I mean, we can get in contact with someone to say, hey, I am going through this. This is where I'm at. I started this little journaling. I started this little prayer. I started a little affirmation. And yet, I am still running over myself. I feel very tense about things that are happening and things that are going on. What do I do next?
Yeah, I definitely think that doing these practices are very helpful just for yourself. Yeah. But if you find that you're still overwhelmed, you're still feeling these overwhelming negative emotions, your day is still imbalanced, you're not getting good sleep, then it may be a good indication that it's time to find someone. Right now, most of the mental health places are doing telehealth. So it can be as simple as just Googling if you want a Black therapist, if you want a female, a male. It can be an easy Google search. I always say finding a good therapist is like finding a good pair of jeans. You got to try some different ones on, and then when it fits, you know. And so just making sure that you're looking at different resources, you're calling different people. A lot of people give free consultations. They might be about 15 minutes. In those consultations, I strongly encourage you to ask questions. What is your understanding of, like for Black clients in particular, what's your understanding of what's happening in society right now?
Yeah.
What's your understanding of the Black Lives Matter movement? Having those types of questions to make sure that it's a good fit for you, that's your time. It's not just about them telling you what they can do for you, but you're the one doing the interview.
And for you guys out there listening, it may not be jeans, but maybe some of you guys are into automobiles. I know I'm not, and sometimes you just have to do a test drive and drive it. And you gotta, I get the women in the jeans, but men are like, I don't know about the jeans.
Fair enough. Automobile's a good one too. Definitely.
We there's not. I don't know if we could say this enough about stigmas in the Black community, Black men, Black women, about getting help. And I really want to champion this drum about we need to know that it's okay and kick away the machonism, the stigma, I don't need that, I don't need this, and let's get healed and healthy, at least start the process of clearing this trauma we're in.
Definitely. And when it comes to the stigma, I think it's important to, again, ask yourself certain questions about what is the value of my healing? What would it look like? What do I really want in this? And also, when you're thinking about those that may judge you or may have something negative to say, especially like family members or friends, it might be helpful to ask yourself if you would like to live the life that they're living. A lot of times the answer is no, I don't want to live that life. And so think about the people that you're that are quote unquote judging you, right, or that have this stigma, because unfortunately the world that we live in is not very healthy.
No.
And so if you want to continue to participate in this unhealthy dynamic, that is your choice. But I do think it's worth asking yourself, what would it look like if I was healed? And am I willing to do what it takes in order to reach that destination?
Are you a fan of behavioral sciences, for the history of behavioral sciences?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Are you a fan of the history of behavioral sciences?
I'm aware of it. I wrote a paper on it. I'm not a fan.
Because here's the thing, and I'm just such a breeder, behavioral sciences, and then the sciences and the cells. There's not many papers you can find on mental health in revolution. Right. So if you were to go study a therapist or a scientist of the times in a revolution, there's not much out there. So we are in a whole new paradigm right now because this is our revolution. This is and for us to think that this isn't normal, I shouldn't be feeling this way. We're in a whole different shift here. So we have to maybe stop thinking that I'm level or maybe I'm wrong in feeling this way. This is new.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And I think with any revolution, it's important to keep in mind that there's, especially historically, there are certain people that have had the control of the pen. There are certain people that have been able to write those stories and write those journal articles and actually publish them. And so part of this is going to be making an informed and intentional commitment to writing your own story and rewriting what may have already been written about you, but really taking control of that story that's being written. And then also recognizing that in any revolution, it's going to be new. It's going to feel weird or different because it's new, and that's to be expected. But it's being able to continue even with that uncomfortable feeling because, they always say, growth can really only happen in discomfort. So understanding that discomfort is part of the experience and it's part of the growth and embracing it.
You hit that right on the head. Nice. It was just beautifully said because, we need to change our what we think about ourselves. We need to change the application of how it was viewed. We have that opportunity. You're in this opportunity, and I think we know a psychologist, we know people who are out here to help you with your story, not the therapist story. People need to stress on that. We don't give you what you need. We help you understand what you are. And that's different than saying, here, this is good for you, do this. Because it's not one size fits all, going back to the pair of jeans. These jeans fit differently for you. This car drives differently for you. So understand who you are in the process.
Absolutely. And also recognizing that who you are is important in the process. So I've heard so many times from people of color are like, Black people don't go to therapy. That's not what we do. And I'm like, well, that's one stance you can take. And we can also talk about the history behind that therapy was a privilege for a very long time for individuals. But there are a lot of people that are working on increasing the access to therapy. And it has been increased. The access to therapy has been increased, whereas back in the day, it was just for the rich people. And they would be happy to tell you all about their therapist. But now it's for everyone, and we're really therapists are really championing that fight and making it accessible to everyone. So it's really up to you to engage, but those past stories can really hinder us if we continue to let it.
What do we're so habitual as human beings, and that's because change is difficult. What do you think about pass on down habitual habits? This is what my mother did. This is what my father did. I've always believed if those words come out of you, you probably need to second guess your actions. Not to think that what they did was good, bad, or whatever, but what are you carrying over and what are you doing and what is your choices?
Absolutely. And when it comes to those conversations, I often ask individuals, why do you believe what you believe? And if it comes down to, it's because my mom did it or because my dad did it, then I would again ask them, is that the life you're trying to live, or would you like to live your own life? Because I believe that your own life would be a lot more fulfilling than following what others have done in the past. But in that same way, one thing I'll often tell individuals that are trying to break that generational curse is the best thing you can do for your child is to develop your own healthy habits. So that now becomes the norm of what's passed down. So it works both ways, where unhealthy habits may have been passed down, but you now are in a powerful situation where you can now pass down healthy habits by first developing it yourself and then demonstrating it to your child. And then your child picks that up and then they grow up in a healthy environment. And they might not even ever need to see me. And that's my goal. My goal is for therapists to not be needed one day. Yeah. But that's not where we are.
It's like an emergency ER nurse or doctor. We don't want to be open. We're trying to get put out of business here.
That is my goal. Please put me out. And that is with the understanding that at the end of the day, all I do as a therapist is point you back to you. Mm-hmm. You have all that you need within you. And once you remember who you are, you don't need me.
The man in the mirror, Michael Jackson, right? So
he was wise. Michael was wise.
He was. Let's wrap this up. Money is always an issue, but calling someone initially, don't worry. I like to say, forget about the money, but that's hard for people to actually say when it is an issue, and that's probably the first thing I can't afford to go. Mm-hmm. I actually believe you can't afford not to try.
Absolutely. And it really comes down to a cost-benefit analysis, where when you're thinking about the unhealthy behaviors that you may be engaging in, like I've had clients that might overeat and they spend a lot of money on just fast food and junk food and so on and so forth. The same thing with individuals that might smoke cigarettes. They spend $10 a pack on cigarettes, and you smoke a pack a day. Do you know how much money that is?
Yeah.
So if we start just thinking about the cost-benefit analysis, we can think about how much money would be saved if we handle this problem, all the things we wouldn't engage in that are costing us extra money. Right. And then we can look at it from that perspective.
Well, but they have to call. They have to call.
When you call, I think it's important to ask if the therapist has a sliding fee scale, because based on how much you make, they can set the fee at an affordable rate. But it's important for you to ask so they know that that's something that you're concerned about. But if you don't even ask, you won't know what they have available.
And you know what? If the therapist you call that doesn't have a sliding scale, they will tell you their people or who they know that does. So you're still not left out in the cold. You're really not. And we really do need to come in and get on this. How can people get a hold of you? I know we're going to do this every week, but how can people get a hold of you?
Definitely. So the best way to get a hold of me is through email. You can reach me at oni.anukem@gmail.com. It's spelled ONYI.ANUKEM@gmail.com.
We're going to keep pounding this every week for our next couple of week series. Mental health is something that we all need to talk about. I've been doing some panel discussions on mental health with some other champion mental health professionals, and I just think we have some great ideas. I don't call them solutions. I have to give them ideas, right? Because solution means that's it. Once you get it, you're done. It's over. And this is not something you can ever be done with. But this is definitely a practice. This is definitely an effort you have to do. And it's just like eating. If you want to be nourished in the body, you have to be nourished in the mind.
Absolutely. Definitely. Awesome analogy.
Anything else you want to say before we take off here and before we take off and see each other next week?
Nope, that's all I have for you all.
Thank you, everyone, for listening to Bridges Live. We're talking with Dr. Oni and Dr. Paul, and we love talking about mental health. If you have any questions, please contact us. You can always contact me at drpaulholisticscience.com or drpaulwdyer@gmail.com. We wish you great mental health, and remember, call someone, see someone, and start journaling, and let's go from there. God bless.